Let's have another walk down the road of the 1970s and 80s. Only this time we're going to look at comics and magazines of the day. I wonder how many people still buy them. I wonder now, because the internet browsing era with information everywhere is upon us. So this may mean that people aren't buying them anymore. Or indeed, when did we last buy one? Actually bought a physical magazine or newspaper from the newsagents. I'm going to dive into a few old comics and magazines that filled our newsagents, from kids' comics to women's favourites, and men's magazines about how we can fix everything with a screwdriver. The top shelf, well, it's not that kind of video. Number 1. The Woman's Own. The Woman's Own has been around since 1932, and initially it was produced as a women's rights magazine and the fight for equality, but did move on through the decades, such as homemaking, beauty, agony aunt's columns. The magazine was aimed at the middle-aged woman, who back in the day was supposed to be homemakers with nothing better to do all day than bake cakes and cook turkeys. So that was why it was packed with lots of recipes. Albeit Woman's Own is still out there, physical magazines have declined in sales to its online subscriptions, but it has grown up. It survives because it took a more modern look for the more independent working woman, and not the one that was chained to the kitchen sink in the 1970s. The Smash Hits magazine. The original title was to be called Disco Fever. This was an absolute hit for every teenager of the time, and everyone remembers it so well. It began in 1978 with its first issue. It features song lyrics to the latest hits printed inside, and that was the main reason why I bought it. Glossy superstars on the front, with interviews that focused on rather daft questions like, do you like trifle, or did you help your mother with her housework, rather than focusing on the questions that we like to be answered, such as, how's the band going to evolve, and what kind of hits are you going to be releasing next, and when's your next album coming out. Mind you, I can remember reading an article by a 12-year-old who did a review on the Human League. He slated them. I was absolutely furious, and I wrote a letter of complaint. I've never wrote one since. Anyway, the magazine at its peak sold over 500,000 copies, and initially, surprisingly, it was only a monthly publication, but it soon escalated to bi-weekly due to its popularity. However, and I'm not sure why it declined, but its last issue was published in 2006. We do get a few one-offs, but nothing regular. The Looking. Na Looking was the kids' absolute favourite. The Looking magazine was first on our shelves in 1971, and it was a massive hit. The front page was featuring the latest TV programmes and stars. It was packed with competitions, news, pin-ups of pop stars and celebrities. It had comic strips of TV heroes of the day, and it had a weekly lineup of programmes for the younger viewers. During its lifespan, we had a yearly annual hardback book, normally produced around Christmas time. But, unfortunately, interviews and copyrights got more expensive, and this led to the fall of sales, because obviously the publications had less content. The Looking ceased to be printed in 1994. They are, as many magazines of the day, very collectible now. The original do-it-yourself magazine was entitled exactly that. It came out in 1970, not to be confused with any other DIY magazines throughout history. It was exactly what it said in the cover. I haven't got a lot of information about this, but it is interesting to say that the original copies are very much in demand today, and they sell very well on online auction sites. The reason is, I believe, that many DIY enthusiasts of a certain age, like me, prefer the imperial measurement as opposed to the metric. I can't find any further facts about this popular magazine, or this particular magazine, or when it ceased publication, but I just wanted to point out why it is so sought after. Magazines for young girls were super popular in the 1970s and 80s, the Blue Jeans, the Mates and the Jackie. and it's the Jackie that seems to be the best remembered, so we're going to have a look at its history. Although it came out as far back as 1963, I'm including this magazine as it was the best-selling girls' magazine in the 1970s and outsold any other magazine of its type. The Jackie name was almost dropped due to the assassination of President Kennedy, which widowed Jackie Kennedy, but it was kept, and speculations arrived at the conclusion that the magazine took its name from Jackie Wilson, the at the time children's book author. Although the name Jackie, due to its unisex use, was the most popular name choice of the 1960s. Who knows? Publication in its prime sold over 500,000 copies a week, which covered pop stars, gossip, real-life stories, and the popular problem pages. The magazine declined due to fashion trend changes, and girls wanted to be more sophisticated in the later part of the decade. With sales plummeting to less than 50,000 copies, the Jackie was closed for sale in 1993, but it is still very, very fondly remembered. Kids' comics. Even by the 1970s, comics had started to decline, slowly, but it was due to kids having things to occupy themselves, other things such as television, and the invention of gadgets, and with families having more disposable income. More toys and games were afforded by parents. The comic was still popular, but the printers had to keep up with the trends, such as TV heroes, which began the Marvel comic industry in 1972, featuring television series characters of the era. Many comics amalgamated, like the Whizzer and Chips, and the Whizzer and Chips and Cheeky, I think. Action comics with more realistic drawings began to arrive in the late 1970s, and by the 1980s, more original comics had started to disappear. Kids went on to current affair publications, looking at pop stars, TV characters, and even the news. Hey, do you remember John Craven's News Round? Adult cheeky publications were released by the introduction of the Viz magazine in 1979. This would be the most popular adult comic of its type, being released 10 times a year. If you like toilet humour and filth from a tacky cartoon-style magazine, this would be the one to read. Lots of foul language and smutty humour, that was its edge, and the release at the beginning had its problems, as you can imagine, but it did settle, with either fond memories or bad taste in the background as a national treasure, like the tax office, council tax, and the atomic bomb, and with some with the same contempt. The magazine is still around today. Action Magazine was a short-lived magazine or comic for boys that took a more violent approach to their stories, such as Killer Sharks, War, a football strip entitled Play to Your Drop, and a story called Coffin Drop. The comic sold well in its first issue since 1976, but the media took an interest into its bad taste and complained of its true-to-life dangers, and the magazine was pulled and reported to be banned within a few months. Mary Whitehouse, remember her? Mary Whitehouse, a household name at the time in campaigning for stricter laws in the media, took a role in condemning the publication. A more calm and less aggressive version of the comic was relaunched, but as a few months passed by, subscriptions had been cancelled and kids had moved on, as they normally did so quickly with their reading, and the comic had lost its appeal, so it was ceased the very next year. Newspapers have always been around, but I believe that we buy far less because they're online. Mind you, if you're not subscribed, you will get bombarded with adverts. In the 1970s, the newspapers were around 6p. I don't know how much they are today, but I know the Sunday magazine, you don't get much change out of a fiver, do you? Anyway, before I finish, this is not me talking. This has been reported as one of the most boring magazines. It was founded in 1989, but the magazine is more recent. It's called the Tractor Magazine, and it features a virtual walk around the manufacturing sites, lots of pictures of colourful tractors, but how to fix the gearboxes and technical help, and a problem page. I won't use the word boring myself because that's a bit cruel, and if I was a farmer and depended on a tractor, this magazine would be my lifeline, so thumbs down to you who don't like it. Anyway, Just before I go, I do want to mention this. I don't know whether it's a compliment or not, but some people think that I'm AI. Now, AI, as far as I know, doesn't breathe, doesn't stutter, doesn't make mistakes, and it certainly, from my memory, doesn't have a Birmingham accent. I can't think of anybody who'd do AI with a Brummie accent. But anyway, I'm not AI. I absolutely promise you that. Anyway, that was a short walk down memory lane of the 1970s with a few publications that we all remember and fondly read. Warm memories? I hope so. Anyway, as always, please forgive my typos and my mistakes, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.